Yeah, because this one, and I have to just mention this point. They show on the cover this like big, tall, fat Jewish guy. But if you read the book, you know that he's this skinny, tiny Jew with a very large opinion. But he's like, I don't know, I felt like he was super easygoing and anything but big and tall. So I just thought that it didn't like fit. And on Thursday, I just read the whole book. I thought it would be like this long, drawn out, sometimes you got to get into it. You got to be in the right mood for a good book. And I felt that like almost right away, I was able to get into it. And so, Devorah, did you have a chance to like read part of it or jump in?
I read the whole thing.
Wow.
Before I started it, I was rather trepidatious because I thought I wouldn't like it because I thought the subject would be a downer.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the book.
Good. I was also worried, like I wasn't sure, but I trusted Leah, like, okay, this has to be good if Leah's telling me it's good. So I was blown away by it because I was pulled in.
Very different book. I never read something like that before.
Yeah. I felt definitely, it definitely pulled me in. So that's why actually I didn't really put quotes by the author because I felt that it was a different flavor of a book that we could use with quotes and like tackle it almost. There wasn't so many quotes. I felt in my mind it was more like notes that I was just trying to absorb everything. But definitely there are quotes that are interesting. So, okay. So Leah, what did you like about it?
Oh, I read it a few years ago. I didn't have time to read it now.
Okay.
So I guess my memory is more stuff that stuck with me a few years later. One thing I really remember there were two things I remember from the book. One is that I found a little bit crazy was he was the head of one of the camps that he was in.
Yeah.
He was bullying him, the Jew. I don't even remember what his name was. And
I think it was Yaakov? Let me see. Who was the main guy? Let me see.
So he was bullying him, and then his mother-in-law told him, "Stop doing that because it's gonna be bad luck." And he's like, "No, nothing will happen to me." And something did happen to him. And I know Russian people are like super superstitious. They're like
superstitious. Yeah.
People out there. So it was pretty crazy. And then the other thing I found very heartwarming was like all his Pesach stories, like how he did Pesach every year.
Yeah.
And it's like I found it so crazy. Like I even like remember like Holocaust stories about like how people went above and beyond to keep kosher on Passover.
Right.
And then he actually this one year they were able to make matzah in the camp. So I was like,
right.
Wow. So that's the two things that really stuck.
Yeah. For me it was I think like it's interesting for me because Michal's family comes from Ukraine, from Russia. And so it was a big deal, especially everything that's going on that he did leave. Otherwise, he would be in Ukraine right now fighting the war because he's that age. But I always heard from my mother-in-law, she always tells me, you don't understand what it was like under Soviet Union, in Soviet Russia, the rule. And I would be like, I'm just an American. I can't really fathom, but here it just really spelled it out. Like, it was almost like they're explaining to you that if you have to sign it, you have no rights, but you have to go officially sign it. And if you don't, they're going to do whatever they want to you. And then you have this guy, and I don't know what he's made of because I don't think most of us are made like that. Definitely not Americans, where he just it just didn't faze him. And I felt like the title then doesn't make sense to me, because Subbota, is all about the fact that he was keeping Shabbos. But it doesn't mention that he was 8 days Pesach not eating, and then he woke up alive in the morgue, that type of story. I was like, this is not just about Shabbos. It's about, I guess, he was fighting for what's right, what he felt, to be honest, even with that, who was the guy, the thief that wanted to go out with this particular girl, and he didn't give him the boots. So like all these different stuff, I was thinking, he's just like this really honest guy. He wants to keep kosher to like a really, even to I felt like a really strict level, in matzah. I felt like the whole thing was so tough, and I mean it was good in a way, but like how he acted, how he dealt with certain situations. I mean, I felt it was really incredible. I also thought he made life very hard on himself. So, I don't know. Okay, Devorah, what are you thinking?
I enjoyed the book. You're amazed time and time again why he doesn't change his mind, why he's so steadfast, which is really amazing.
Right.
Considering all of the perils and experiences that he had.
Yeah.
At the end of the book, I would have liked a chapter on what he did after he got out. Because after you have all of this, I don't want to say drama.
Right.
And I think it said in the end that he moved to Israel. And I would have liked to have just a little bit of how he reintegrated and what happened,
Right. So there was this little bit at the end of the book, kind of what you're saying as well, where I thought at first that he just was able to get into life, but it mentions that it wasn't so easy for him.
Right.
That it took him a while. That he kind of lived the life of the jail time. Oh, like that's crazy schedule, even when he didn't have to. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that kind of really reminds me of a lot of people. They say if there's a man that goes to jail, for 20 years, he's institutionalized. When he comes out, he's going to do whatever it takes to get back in, because that's all he knows.
Mm-hmm.
He can't imagine life on his own. He can't, I was speaking to somebody who I know who's only been in jail for, and he worked during the day. It was a very light sentence where he was able to do work in the day, and at night he went to jail. And he was explaining to get a job afterwards, to first of all, to figure out your mind. They help them, even going to a proper psychologist. And that's only, and he's still in therapy, and that's 3 or 4 years out. He did something wrong with, I don't know if it was a payment thing, something silly, something wrong. And so he got sentenced to, I think it was about a year, because he was a little bit too fresh for the judge, if you know what I'm saying. Like, he went to act a certain way. So unfortunately he didn't do that, and he ends up, but now after 4 or 5 years, he's out, he's working. The jobs have to be these hard, difficult jobs. Most people don't want to take someone, even if it's for some, they don't. And so that's only 1 year we're talking about, and half the time he was out. I can't even imagine what other prisoners go through. Sometimes they do terrible things, but if you look at, there's plenty, I think, African Americans where sometimes they're mistaken identity, or something like that, where some of them don't really deserve the treatment that they get, and they're stuck there for who knows how long. So I just found it 20 years, and then I'm trying to think of how he dealt with it in his own house afterwards. There was no one to bother him every day. I don't know. It's just something that I was thinking about.
What happened to his wife? Because she's all alone, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking that too, yeah.
15 years, she's okay, I have to visit him. right?
Yeah.
And then, like, even the one time she visited him, it was like, because in American jail, spouses visit each other, right?
Right.
There's like, and then had to like travel probably for months or something to get there.
Right. And when she did come, she had no idea what was going on. And they did like a strip search on him. And she was like, felt so bad for him. She's crying. And he thought like, oh, what was the big deal? Because he's so used to it at that point. Like it's not a big deal. Like, you know. So I thought that was pretty funny too. It was horrible. But at the same time, I felt there was like this hidden humor, you know. It was just something else. And I felt that throughout the chapters, you kind of felt that God is, you know, every once in a while, there'd be another beautiful story that he would have to kind of give him that breather. So if you remember, they stuck him in the murderer, thieves, and who knows what else in this, like, place. And he was supposed to die. Instead, they let him sleep as long as he wants. He was able to recover from everything that they were doing. It's like crazy, you know. And then another time, he was the watchtower guy. So he had a little apartment with these people, like they were like religious. It was so strange. And so like it was almost like every, you know, of course this is over a span of 20 years, but it was every once in a while you kept seeing that there was something, you know, like it was okay, he can handle it, he can deal with it, you know. But yeah, it was absolutely incredible that he survived. And I just, it's like, again, it's an eye-opener for me for what happened with how Russians treated their people. I don't think that I think we're beginning to get a little bit, I guess, understand, you know, a little bit of what they go through, seeing a little bit what's going on with Ukraine and seeing how terrible, you know, the dictator is in Russia. But it's just like an eye-opener, I think, just to see what's going on. So, does anybody want to read the different quotes? Should we tackle them?
Is that in the email?
I think I sent it in the email. Did I send it out?
Oh, it's on the bottom of the link.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I...
Maybe I'll read the first one then.
Okay, I'll read the first one. So, there's a short paragraph. It says, Avram Netzach survived 20 years of captivity in the prisons and slave labor camps of the Soviet Union. Throughout 2 decades, I don't know if it's Avram Netzach because, and here it says Nana, so I'm not sure, but maybe that's the name they put on. Throughout 2 decades of tremendous human suffering, he remained faithful to his religious principles. In every prison in Russia, he was known as Subbota, Sabbath, for despite all of his efforts by his oppressors to break him, he never worked on Shabbos. The cry of thousands who went through the same terrible experience but did not have the good fortune to come out alive is echoed in Avram Netzach's work. Okay, quote for analysis. Then we spread a cement sack out on the shelf where we slept at night and set the Seder on it. We put out 3 matzahs for each of us. We didn't have maror, but we didn't lack bitter experiences. We had no wine either, but we had it in our thoughts, and we began the Seder. So I brought that quote because of the idea, like obviously they didn't have the right stuff, but I thought it was kind of cute of how they put it out. You know, oh, we didn't need that because we already were suffering, and we didn't have a wine because that was how we had, you know. That was kind of cute, but I wanted to know what you guys felt about it because obviously he didn't, you know, I don't know, it just was interesting. So I thought it stuck out to me, so I put it down as something to...
I don't remember if it was the Seder or some other one, but I remember he said, oh, I wish I could go back to the time where we all sat and did Seder together. So I would think if I was, like from my perspective, I wouldn't want to think about all the stuff that I've been going through in the prison. But for him, like a lot of it is just basically his whole life in youth, and there are a lot of good moments. So he does remember stuff that he wishes he could relive and go back there. And it was specifically those Pesachs. But
Right. Yeah, he remember like, I guess his memories. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it's interesting because technically Mavor is to remember that it was bitter, but he doesn't need to remember, right?
Yeah, because he's already suffering.
Basically.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay, Leah, do you want to read the next one?
Sure. The doctor was particularly angry at me. You are master over your own life. He argued, but what right do you have to bring tragedy upon this young lad? He's barely past his childhood. He hasn't begun to enjoy life. He's too weak to endure the hard work and hunger. You will have this on your consciousness because he is completely under your influence. Persuade him to work on Shabbos and save his life.
Right. So there was a kid named Shmuel that like kind of followed him around, and I felt like he had someone to not be lonely with. You know, he had someone who cared to be a part of all the different things that he was doing. And I always feel like it always helps a person, even though it helped Shmuel, this kid, you know, it also helped him. I felt that it was very difficult for him. He was a little bit older in jail, trying to survive everything. You know what I'm saying? So I felt that was really good that he had that. But eventually the boy gets out. If you remember, he gets out. He
got out earlier.
Yeah, he got out earlier. So, Devorah, you want to read the next one?
My own future as a prisoner did not affect my happiness for Shmuel. We made a covenant at that moment not to lose confidence in God. I think the influence of Abraham and also the companionship and steadfastness that Shmuel had for Abraham, I think made a big difference in both of them.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, I think they both started jail together, right? And they both decided together that they will stick to it, right?
Oh, to the Shabbos. Yeah, I think he met him later on, but yeah.
Really?
Yeah, but they were, you know, like I said, it was interesting because throughout the book, I felt like when it got really hard for him, then all of a sudden something else comes up and he's distracted for a time, you know, and it's not so hard. Devorah, you want to read the next one too?
His name alone was enough to terrify even the officials. He had killed more than once and had faced death himself, but he could still weep when he saw my condition.
Yeah, this was, there was like that murderer. He was like this thief or murderer guy. And he felt bad for him. I'm not sure if he was the one. I think there was two thieves that really felt close with him. I have no idea why. But one of the thieves felt close with him because he reminded him of the man that took him in. There was a Jewish family that took him in when his parents died, and he had a soft spot for him. So he felt bad that he was going to go and suffer. And so I'm not sure if that was the same thief or if it was a different part of the story, but that was interesting. How even someone who seems like he doesn't have a heart, he doesn't have a soul, you know, there is a heart still there. So I'm beginning to believe in God, the director exalted. This is a real miracle. If you hadn't noticed that they put something in your coat, and if the guard had found it, we could never have defended you. For stealing those vegetables, the chief Nachaleknik of the camp would have given you 15 strict days in the dungeon, and you would never have lived through them. So I thought that was a really interesting point. If you remember the time when he was at the farm or something, and he was able to be up there, and he knew that he can't take the tomatoes and cucumbers, and one day he felt that his coat was heavy, but he saw that these people put stuff in, and he knew if he was caught, they would like kill him, and they wanted to get rid of him. So that I thought that was really hashgacha pratis, like another example of hashgacha pratis, like Hashem was watching over him, even when, you know, it just seems like a bad thing, but really that was really a positive that he was safe. Leah, you want to read the next one?
At the time, I did not believe this fiction about being Jewish. I knew him to be a brute and observed him abuse prisoners. I helped him anyway, feeling that treating an evil person with kindness does affect him.
So, like, what are your thoughts on that? I thought that was like a pretty powerful
I
quote.
don't remember this.
Yeah, I thought like, well, oh, so this was a person who was very bad, but like he helped him out because he said he was Jewish. And the thing is, we don't really know if he was or not. I'm assuming he probably was, but the person who's writing it wasn't sure. And I thought it was interesting how, his viewpoint. So I wanted to know what you guys thought about that. Okay, let's see the next one. I don't know, but treating an evil person with kindness does affect him. I think actually it does help. I think that a person, I guess a crazy person, probably not, but somebody who is very, kind of was raised in a certain way, and then you're very gentle with them, I think it has an impact over time. So.
Over time.
Yeah. The question is how much time, yeah. So, okay. I told her about the appeal. I understand how hard it must be to start a new 10-year term here. But a man as religious as yourself must never lose hope. Meanwhile, you had better take care of your health as well as you can in these circumstances. So I remember that was really tough when he realized that they wanted him to sign these papers. And again, how the Russians did it is they would torture people into signing, which is, it's so crazy. You can't even imagine that can be real. And he walks in there. He had a lot of guts in this courtroom. He goes, I know all of you guys are not listening. You're not really taking my testimony seriously. And he knew that it was coming another 10 years. He knew that was what they wanted to give him because he kept Shabbos, which sounds so crazy. And there was another guy actually over Shabbos. I was mentioning this book because I couldn't believe how incredible in my mind a person can be like so strong. And also the fact that the Russians would, actually did this. I couldn't believe it. And Rev Mendel Fuderfass, he was a chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He also had 20 years in prison. And, so he was a very positive person. So when he came out, we always heard that he was like a silly kind of a person. He would, of course, learn and do things, but he always had this great approach to being positive. So that was the other. I didn't realize that people, it was like a more common thing to get like a certain amount of years. So I couldn't believe that. So yeah, again, I thought that was really something.
Imagine spending 20 years of your life in prison. It's crazy.
I know. I can't even imagine.
It's like one thing if you like killed somebody, so like.
Yeah, it's one thing if you did something wrong. Yeah.
But like over like nothing.
And the truth is, I think it's a terrible thing if people, they do something wrong. If they kill someone, it's a horrible thing. If they steal, it's a bad thing. But I think that the whole system as it is, I feel like there has to be some sort of reform to it. Because I think that, I don't know, and don't throw the book at me, but I feel that, that some situations where people are being raised or there's so much drugs. If can you imagine if somebody was on drugs, they have no idea what they're doing. Of course it's wrong if they were on it, but they have no idea what they're doing. And then they could get like 20 years in jail for not really, it's like you're under the influence. And of course the question is, who a person's responsible when they're drinking, they're responsible when they're taking drugs. But the question is if they're like this teenager that wouldn't really understand what they're doing and then, be slapped with this crime for so many years. I think sometimes it's like, I don't know, it's a hard call. So that's what I think. I think it's tough, especially if people just sit there nowadays. They don't really go and have fresh air and, be able to fix themselves. There's no real proper rehabilitation. They're kind of just stuck there and they sometimes get worse. So it's really, I think the prison system has to figure out a way where if someone does something wrong, that there's a way to really fix it, not just sit there for 20 years, So I don't know. If you disagree, I'd wish you to tell me, it's fine. Just.
I can hear where you're coming from. It really depends. Some people kill just because they're evil.
Yeah, absolutely, they are.
But it depends on why.
Right. Yeah, some people, yeah, are absolutely evil, like you said. And some people, I feel like it's the wrong circumstances that they were in, and it was a tough situation, and they're kind of stuck. So, that's hard too. Okay, Deborah, you want to read the next one? See what we're up to.
Sure.
I think it is.
A Jew is
Here.
forbidden to take revenge, I told her. I don't want to humiliate him further. He has already received God's punishment. I hope that in camp he'll have enough time to consider his evil doings. He might regret the evil he did to others and change.
Right.
That's, that's pretty, I'm going to say high, I don't want to say high-handed, but she's like taking the high road,
Yeah.
Even though he had an opportunity to humiliate this person. And even after all that he had been through,
Yeah.
he still takes the high road and doesn't inflict on others the suffering that he had. And it would be a normal human reaction to try and want to get back at somebody.
Right. Absolutely. I think that was also another really powerful thing about this person, where it wasn't just about Shabbos in my mind. It was also like how he conducted himself, how he was very forgiving and very tried to just, not let it get to him, which I thought was really a special.
And I guess that's what's really amazing about the person in this book, is not only was he able to survive terrible hard labor and bad conditions that were not hygienic, that would certainly kill you, but still to have this fortitude to maintain his principles in the face of everything that was done to him to break him.
Right.
And you get the impression that if they had broken him, he would have died. Definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because also his heart, he was an older person. That's what they keep saying, and his heart wasn't that good. And I remember every time before the interrogations, they would have this person chasing him. And I'm thinking, like, why did they get, on one hand, like, we think, why would you keep running if he's chasing you? But then on the other hand, we're like, we're not living in those times. We have no idea what they would do, So it was, it was rough. Okay, Leah, you want to read the last one?
Is R for rabbi or?
Yeah. Is
Okay.
it? Yeah, I think it's Reb David, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Reb David, do you think you had a sub job for 8 years because you are clever? You're wrong. Remember, Reb David, that there is God. He made the world and he conducts it. He gave you an easy life for 8 years in camp. Now you're going to another camp. Reb David, God is in this camp too. He will provide you with a decent life there, and he will return you to your family in good health.
Yeah, I think he was talking.
Very optimistic.
Yeah. I felt he was talking to himself as well. Because they had a similar sentence, It was, wow.
At the end of the book, when, I don't remember which camp he was, but the head of his camp, I think there was the Nazi camp, I don't remember, where the head of his house, or whatever it's called, he helped him to keep the high holidays, and he's like, why are you helping me? And he said, well, when I was a young boy, this Jewish family would invite me so I can help them to do all this Shabbos stuff. He was their Shabbos boy. And they treated him very well. And for a small, poor boy to have those beautiful Shabbos meals, for him it was so grand and amazing. And to see how he was treated nicely on Shabbos, even though he was a boy, and many years later he repaid somebody with it. And I always remember this book to say, like, I need to be nice to all these people. I need to be a good person, because you never know.
Right.
Like, one of those non-Jewish people might do something good to another Jew.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had that one coworker. He told me that until he met me, he hated Jews. Now he doesn't hate Jews anymore. So I thought that, yeah.
Yeah, they say...
it's one of those books that really stuck to me throughout the years.
Yeah, this is an incredible book. And I really feel like they got to change the picture on the front. It doesn't, you know. So
Louis Armstrong had a story like that.
Oh, yeah? Wow.
And that he wore Magen David on his necklace for the rest of his life, because this Jewish family took him in originally as a Shabbos Goy, and then they kind of took him into their home to live.
Wow.
And raised him.
Wow.
He was always very grateful to that, because he came from a rough background.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's true what you're saying. You know, it's important how we act, you know, because you never know who it can help, especially Jews being like 2% or less than 2% of the population. It's important. So, wow. So
but it was really an amazing. You're amazed throughout the whole thing how he could have the fortitude to keep on going and to keep on.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'd never do this.
I was thinking about the dungeon. It sounded so scary. And he's like, oh, finally I get to go back to my dungeon. Oh my gosh. So that was very scary. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it was, and he's not the first person. You know, I'm thinking about the Rebbe's father, who had, I think it was 20 years they gave him in Yekaterinoslav, which is the exile, and how difficult it was on him. And he never got to see his son again. He never saw the Rebbe again. And who was it? His wife would go out and make berries for him. You know the whole story. She'd make these little berries so he could write, because he loved to write. And it was difficult for him. I think that it was very hard for him to schlep around, whatever it was. So it was difficult. And they really felt that there was a huge lacking, because they're in the middle of nowhere, but there were some people that would come and want to visit them. And so that made it very special. But I think it's a lot of these stories somehow, you know, I feel like I've heard some of these stories my whole life. You know, even there was in my own family, there was the three, and they called them the Rothschild sisters. So no, it's not the rich ones. We're the part of the family that was the very poor ones. And there were three sisters from Russia that came over, and everyone had their story of how they escaped and all this stuff, you know. But I guess we just I never really believed how, you know, I always thought there was, you know, maybe the mentality of how they say, oh, the KGB or this or that. I never really understood to what games that they played with people's lives, to how they were so manipulative and, you know.
Yeah, take into consideration the Jews in Russia, probably the vast majority before the Russian Revolution, they were very religious.
Wow.
And then when Soviet Union broke, like, very small amount of them were religious. So this Avram guy, he's like 1 in a million.
Yeah.
Most people couldn't. My grandma came from a very religious family, but after her father was arrested, they were just too scared. My grandma's first language was Yiddish, and she just forgot it. She was just too scared to remember it.
Right. Wow.
You could like actually like go to jail for speaking Yiddish.
Wow. Yeah, same with Michal's grandfather. He was in Cheder, and he remembers when it was closed, you know? And there was like this, the way they made matzahs, they had these like really old ovens where they would go and they would make it secretly for other people that couldn't. And that was his grandfather's mother would do that. but everything was in secret. And I never, like, I guess we never really understand how scary it was, you know, we just thought like, oh,
Yeah.
man.
And there was like very secret like kosher meat in like Odessa, and like rabbis would like secretly give like kosher. People still carry that mentality with them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Jews in Egypt where they had to die off, and then a new generation had to come to, because that kind of mentality, it sticks with you like forever. Like it's something that ingrained into you.
Yeah, that's true. Which is so sad, you know, because you like, I feel like the New Yorkers, like the New York mentality, it's kind of like that, you know. It's, you know, I guess it depends where, but I can tell you, it's kind of like you have this always thinking, and then when you come over here, you know, you're like, well, there's no bars in the window, you don't have to worry about anything. It's just like a different mentality in a way. But
Exactly.
yeah, so it was definitely a great book.